Not only did I find people who were super, super talented, they were telling stories that I couldn't have told myself, and people who look like me couldn't have told either. Okay, so it's not easy to kill a god, even if you're another god. That sounds very violent, and I'm telling you that in playing God, you don't have to run a violent game at all. It can be completely pacifistic, but if you want to get violent, because there's a lot of violence in real world mythologies, then you can.
My name's Rich,
And I'm Adam.
and this is Renegade Rolls. I'm here with Adam Hancock of Gnome Made Games, TTRPG maker, massive nerd just like me, and really interesting guy. Adam, how's it going? Great to see you.
Going pretty well today. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Playing God is your latest project on Backerkit, which just hit 100%. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What can people expect from it that's different to other TTRPGs that they might have played, and how will the Deicide mechanic work?
So, playing God, you don't play a mere mortal anymore. No matter how overpowered that mortal is, now you're a god. Um, and it was inspired by real world mythology primarily, and then some fantasy mythology, like the kind you might see in D&D lore. And what I what I wanted to do was to create, well, I don't know what I set out to do. Right now we're in beta playtesting, and I have all these people who are just experiencing the game for the first time. Uh, and so it's really starting to be propagated to sort of this larger group of people. And I've noticed that like it's a much calmer experience. It feels really, really, yeah, just the pace is much slower. You can really think about the implications of your actions beforehand. Uh, and because and in game, each thing you do is called a wonder, and the time that you do the wonders in is called an age, which by I guess by default is 1,000 years, but you can make it longer or shorter as your game so dozens of generations of mortals come and go as you sort of decide what you want to do. And the wonders include things like create a new plane of existence or smite another god or steal their domains uh, or create a mirror plane or create an afterlife or create a new species of people or animal. And it's really, really interesting because you feel like you're part of the world building itself, right? You're not just being brought in by a DM or GM who says, come play this game I make up. It's in this world I made. It's come build a world with me, right? And then if we wanted to, we could use that lore that we've created together and all have sort of a shared stake in, and then we can play other games in it as well. I mean, how cool is it that you can like create a god and play the god for a little while, and then switch over to something else like Pathfinder, D&D, or Daggerheart, and play a worshiper of that god in a very different kind of game. I just think that that's really, really cool. And that's sort of what playing God has become for me. It's kind of like this collaborative storytelling, world building game that you have a complete lore and history of when you finally wrap it, whenever you decide, if you're like up in the upper echelons of godhood and you don't know what else to do with yourself, then you can be like, okay, this one is done. Like this world is set, and now we can play mortals within it or whatever. Okay, so it's not easy to kill a god, even if you're another god. You can, what I would do is I would first start to weaken them. So one of the things you can do is to strip away their worshippers, either by distancing that other god from their worshippers or converting their worshippers to your cause instead, and that weakens them. Another thing you can do is to, like I said, steal their domains. So they might be the god of death and fate and magic. And if you can start to take those pieces away from them, those core aspects of their identity, then that weakens them further. Once they're bereft of all those, they still have all this power, um, but they have very few worshippers and few, if any, domains. And then they're susceptible to attack, and then you can kill them. And I'm saying that knowing that like that sounds very violent, and I'm telling you that in playing God, you don't have to run a violent game at all. It can be completely pacifistic where you're just creating, right? A very,
Yeah.
world building sort of Sim City, but on a cosmic scale kind of experience. But if you want to get violent, because there's a lot of violence in real world mythologies, then you can. You can also attack other gods through your paragons and worshippers, um, and raise up other gods to do your dirty work if you want to as well. And that's another way of going at it as well. So it's kind of cool if you want to run a very violent game. I'm running two playtesting groups right now. One, they're starting from nothing and they're creating worlds and a multiverse. And the other one, they're feuding with another pantheon. So there you have very
Right.
different feels. And it's fun to watch them have completely different takes on what that game can be for them.
Something you mentioned was the slower pace of the game. I saw online somewhere you were running a group that was actually doing play by post.
Right. So in beta playtesting, because my time is a little limited right now, because I'm actively running the campaign, we're doing play by post to start, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes when we do real time play as well. I still suspect it's going to feel slower than like just a slower pace than a D&D game.
I think for my groups, it could be fantastic if we know we've got a few weeks before we can actually get playing again because life happens, stuff gets in the way. Saying, hey, let's do some world building just now
Mhm.
and run it play by
Yeah.
post for a couple of weeks. And by the time we come to it, we'll have a much richer universe to play in.
Yes, absolutely.
When and how did you come across the weird and wonderful hobby of TTRPGs?
As a player, I picked up a box set in a department store. I had no idea what it was, and I bought it on a whim. I was maybe 16 or 17 years old, and that's how it all started. Um, so yeah, that is not the typical way that people begin, especially nowadays, but that's how I started.
And was that Dungeons and Dragons or some
It
mystery
was it
unnamed?
No, if it's in a department store, it's generally Dungeons and Dragons, and so that's what I started with. Yeah, I think it was technically it was just before third, it was a little bit before third edition came out, so I guess it was a second edition box set. I feel like anyone who was introduced to it in the 90s has to have sort of an obligatory pause period where they don't pay any attention to it at all, and then they pick it up again, which is was my experience as well.
I'd be really curious to hear your perspective as an indie creator in the post Wizard of the Coast OGL era, where suddenly, at least from my perspective, there seem to be a load of new systems with like the big names and backing, which are coming out soon. There's Daggerheart, the MCDM ones, other publishers as well with things in the work. Do you think you or others are making these sort of supplementary materials to existing TTRPGs? Do you think you'll stick to sort of being 5e compatible, or will you look to branch out to support other systems?
First of all, yes, it's a weird time to be into this industry. I was upset and dismayed with what Wizards of the Coast did with their OGL or tried to do before everyone started pulling their D&D Beyond subscriptions and going on angry tirades on the internet. So for a long time, and I think this is true still today, but for a long time, I didn't know where to go or what to do. I knew that I had already started to fall in love with the idea of other systems. I started to branch out and try to read more widely after having been almost D&D exclusive. And now I'm kind of in the position where I could go in any number of directions. I am currently doing a video series on YouTube and TikTok called Finding My Next Favorite TTRPG, and it's going well in that I am finding a lot of material out there to cover. I've got over 2 dozen games under my belt that I've read, not played, unfortunately. I don't have that kind of time, but I've read them and given my thoughts on this video series. And but I would say that I'm still looking for my next favorite one. Unfortunately, as a designer, I always have to kind of think about what the player base is doing as well. Because if I gravitate towards something that has like 50 avid players and no one else knows about it, then I can't make a living off of designing for that. Maybe I could give it a small boost, but I don't think that that's sustainable. So I have to sort of also see where people go, and what they do. I think a lot of people are going to stick with D&D ultimately, but I'm excited for the prospect of other games, especially big names like MCDM and Darrington Press, which is the publishing arm of Critical Role, what these games that they're making, because they perhaps have the audience that I could kind of go in that direction as well.
Does this new plurality of big systems have any effect on the systems you're designing yourself?
Possibly, um, not because I'm trying to do what others are doing or that I am purposely imitating other people's rules. But if I fall in love with like the initiative system of MCDMs, which I'm not that's not a good example, but it's actually Daggerheart's initiative system that I really like. Or if or actually that's not right either.
They
I
do
have
have
a
an initiative system, which actually is
I've
something
read
to
too many
like as
games
well.
in too
Yeah,
short a time, so I don't know
yeah.
what I'm talking about anymore. I have to go back and look at my notes. Um, Daggerheart has a really cool HP system, and I really, really like it. And so if I ever design my own games, which I do all the time, then I might be tempted to do something similar to them. Um, or I might realize that once you start opening up your eyes to the other kinds of possibilities that are out there, then you can, whether it's by designing with another creator and they kind of clue you into their ideas or what else is out there, or you're going around looking at other systems yourself, it necessarily affects how you like what your likes and dislikes are, what your preferences are, and that affects the way you design. If I had only ever read D&D 5th edition, then I think my design would be a lot different than how my tastes today.
Do you think there'll come a time when we don't just assume D&D is the default?
I hope so. Um, I think that no matter how many players we bring in, this is still a very small industry. It is a niche hobby, and because of that, um, if we are split the player base up among 50 games, then I think that means there are 50 struggling companies, because they're all vying for this very small player base. So, but do I think that we could have two or three that are sort of almost equal with each other in terms of fan base and revenue? I hope so. I don't know if it's around the corner, but I hope that it'll be that way someday. I think it'll be a healthier ecosystem once we get there.
That leads me beautifully to the next question here. The number of people playing TTRPGs, especially D&D, in recent years has exploded. What do you think the next catalysts will be to grow the hobby? Or do you think we've reached a peak for the foreseeable future?
It's such an interesting question. I wish I had that crystal ball, but I didn't know anything about Stranger Things connection to D&D until it aired, and then I started watching it. I was like, "Oh, they play D&D, these kids on this TV program." And I didn't know anything about Critical Role until my sister said, "Oh, you like D&D, right? Have you seen this?" Basically, they called it an audio drama. I was like, "No." So, who knows what the next it could be so many different things. It could be, some people thought it was going to be the D&D movie that would bring a whole bunch of new
I
um
liked that. People
players.
people were so down on that, but that was a lovely, fun film.
It was money and time well spent.
Yeah,
It's not going to win major awards for
yeah.
acting or screenwriting, but it was good. And I enjoyed my time watching it, but I don't think it like brought a whole bunch of new people into the fan base. Some. there's always a trickle with any mention or something like that in popular media. What was the other thing? Oh yeah, the Baldur's Gate game, and I'm not into video games almost at all, but I wonder what effect that had on the hobby. And it's so hard to get good numbers of people actively playing. I don't think even Wizards of the Coast knows exactly how many people play
Yeah.
D&D.
The number of people who play but stay well away from the online tools, just play on pen and paper. And there's that statistic of, yeah, GMs who are like a fifth of the player base spend 80% of the money. I can't remember the exact numbers on that.
Hmm.
So when we hear things like D&D is under monetized, that's that famous line that Cynthia Williams said that one, I believe, and
Uh-huh.
just the horror from from a lot of the people who are heavily involved, like, oh no.
I
Um,
know. How many
so
more books can I have on my shelf?
yeah, well,
And I know
I'm working on a second shelf now. That's the thing.
no,
That's
I
I'm
know what she
progressing.
meant.
Yeah,
She meant besides the books, right? But I think that misunderstands the audience. Like we are here for a book centric. It could be a digital book, right? PDFs or D&D Beyond, but we're here for a book centric experience. If these big tomes that are at least 100 pages often. And I don't know if we'll ever like if we get away from that, then I don't think it's really a tabletop role-playing game anymore. Like there's D&D the brand, which can be movies and mugs and t-shirts and all of those things, but
there's Converse now as well.
I'm really just interested in those games. And usually I just want the rules content, and I make up my the rest by myself. So,
Yeah, I heard a good line recently of to try and monetize every aspect of D&D is to monetize every aspect of friendship, of people coming to a table together and sharing snacks. How do
right,
you, and that's not possible.
right.
Uh, something else I read, which was fascinating, is a much broader topic, but that it's likely, given the spread and ubiquitousness of AI, that people will look to be sort of countercultural to that and look to react against that, and will be
Mm.
seeking out more, call it lo-fi hobbies. At that point, we do then have other problems like Skynet taking over and all of that. But it's a really interesting prospect.
Right. I think that's true. It does feel like somebody who is generally anti-AI that the internet and a lot of big tech is becoming hostile. It really does feel like it's being shoved down your throat, even if you try to avoid it. So we'll see what counter measures we can take.
That feels like a conversation for off the
Right.
record, that one, planning the revolution. Where do you find the motivation and creative spark to come up with new and diverse TTRPG projects? And how do you switch off when you're away from games?
The first part is easy for me, because my mind, I have ADHD, and my particular flavor of it is that my mind never really stops. It's like a pressure cooker of ideas. It's always bubbling away. I can be cutting the grass or washing dishes or trying to fall asleep or trying to wake up. And my mind is thinking it's like dice are being rolled all the time. And I'm hatching schemes and I'm like, oh, what if I rewrote that section to do this? Or what if this could be an interesting new dice mechanic? Or what if I rewrote the lore this way? And it's always going. So if I ever get a glassy-eyed look, I'm probably thinking about tabletop role-playing games and designing them in some way. So, but the second part is how do you divide your this because this is my work. I'm also a librarian, but this is my work. How do you divide that from the rest of your personal life? Probably not as well as I should. As I said, there's a lot of times where I just start to design in my mind. And then it just feels like a huge relief to finally type it out and put it down so it doesn't have to only occupy this and I'm trying to hold on to all the little pieces, but I can actually get it onto paper or digital paper as it might be. But if anyone has any tips or tricks about keeping it separate from bleeding into your personal life and all the other the non-TTRPG part of your life, I would love to hear them.
Well, you've come to the right place. One of my recent videos, which if I can point in the right, I think in that direction, will hopefully pop up on screen. Was all about
Perfect.
how to find inspiration for starting games and how to switch off, how to yeah, what I do at least. So it's a bit more personal than some of my videos on how to stop, switch off, just chill and breathe.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's mostly me telling stories about nearly sinking in a boat. So maybe not
Mm.
relaxing, might not be everyone's cup of tea, but yeah, yeah, I enjoyed it. My first contact with your work was with the Demiverse, which I bought and then ran as a serial style campaign. How did that project come about, and how did you find managing so many contributors to it?
Okay, so that project came about. Yes, there's the book. The premise of it is that the multiverse exploded dramatically and without warning. Not even the gods were able to predict um, that it was going to happen, and then because all of the planes fused or spread out in confounding and interesting ways. And none of them were very big. What remained, every each one was a demi-plane, no more than a few hundred square miles at most. That left some very, very interesting design spaces for people. And I knew as soon as I came up with that core idea that I couldn't do it by myself, that I need to hire a diverse group of people. And so I'll walk you through how I did that in a minute. But the reason that I wanted to make something by Demiverse is because I was tired of feeling like I didn't understand these large and complex campaign settings, especially in D&D, where they go through like they survive multiple editions, and sometimes they're razed to the ground and then built back up. And there's just such a wealth of history and lore and real world history about the real people who designed and made them, and their obscure thoughts that are hidden in um, corners of the internet now or screenshotted from websites that are dead. I always felt like even with like for the Forgotten Realms and Ravenloft and some of these really big ones, I was like, I feel like I'm late to the party somehow, even though I've been here since second edition. So, and I feel like I'm never going to master the lore of these places. And I also don't want to have, I don't want that to be a requirement to really feel like this place is yours. And so when I started to think about what would I do if I were to make a campaign setting, the idea was the Demiverse. And so what I did was I put out a call all over the internet. So I had people applying who I'd never talked to or met before, or even heard of before. And um, and I really wanted it to be a diverse place. So I also asked questions about Demiverse is going to be a project that includes diversity. How can you um, add to the diversity of the project? So that was one of the questions. And then I weighted the responses not just on their core idea, because everyone gave me one or more ideas about what they wanted to make, but also, um, I wanted to include voices from minorities, all kinds. And I think we succeeded uh, for the most part on that front. Not only did I find people who were super, super talented, but they were telling stories that I couldn't have told myself, and people who look like me couldn't have told either. And I think it just contributed to this sort of this amazing, sometimes, oftentimes really, really surprising tome, and we have volume two coming out really, really soon. We're getting there are two pieces of art left, and the layout besides that art is almost done, and then it'll be live. So we're looking forward to seeing even more of the Demiverse as it expands.
Surprising players as well when if everyone's a bit sort of long in the tooth of playing in the same world in the same setting, having
Hmm.
something which you've no idea what's coming. Where yeah, we've seen 100 goblins, 100 trolls.
Hmm.
Have you ever seen a sentient bus with is it death driving? I don't think it's ever explained. But whatever the hell was happening there.
Someone who
Yeah,
resembles death for
yeah.
sure.
One thing of many I really like about your publications is that they really do champion diversity within the hobby. An Elf and an Orc Had Little Baby is a great example of this. I went on a social media following spree of a load of the Demiverse contributors and artists, which was just a really good decision. Otherwise, my timeline is now full of wonderful things. How do you feel the hobby's changing with regards to inclusivity? And is there anything you'd like to see from the big publishers which could make things better?
Yeah, it is changing. It's not changing fast enough. I think that one of the things that probably will fall last, but needs to fall eventually, is the idea that I've seen it said that like what Wizards of the Coast is diversifying in their hiring practices, but I think one of the things that they're not doing yet at, at all, as far as I can tell, is or maybe just in very tiny ways, is diversifying in their promoting practices. Until we see diversity in all levels of management at Wizards of the Coast, I think we're still going to run into problems that, you know, things slip through, like the Hadozee fiasco,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
um, where it's just like that totally could have been avoidable if just one person with any say from a minority background could have seen that. They would have been like, "Oh, wait, nope, stop the presses, and we need to recall that and make sure that never sees the light of day." But unfortunately, it just went through anyway because I don't think people in the key positions that could have stopped that were in those key positions.
I think one thing I've seen which is great is things like removing bioessentialism.
Hmm.
That is now you have to dig quite deep in some. I'm thinking 5e in some of the stat blocks to find these things are inherently evil, unless they are coded as monstrosities or things from the hells somewhere. What are your personal TTRPG games like? What systems do you play, and are you a forever GM?
I am a forever GM, but by choice because I slightly prefer to be a GM over a player. Oddly enough, I am a player right now. I am not currently running any games except for the beta playtesting of Playing God. So it's been interesting to be a player again after many, many years of only being a GM. We are playing a Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition game right now, where I play a gnome rogue who is entirely too good at convincing people to do things that are against their own interests. Um, and that's a lot of fun because I recently moved to a new place and I found a game group within months of moving here, and I'm extraordinarily lucky to have found this group of people. And when they said we're playing D&D 5th edition, I was like, okay, that's fine. And my long-term goal is to convince them to try a few other things, which I'm almost succeeding at. So, um, and then I have read widely at this point. I think I can start to say I have also played Pathfinder and Lady Blackbird and a few other things, Honey Bear Heist or something like that, which is a very fun little sort of one-shot style game. And um, and I've created a few games of my own, Luncheons and Dragonflies, where you play small woodland creatures who scavenge things on the woodland floor and in people's homes and just try not to get caught by predators or humans. Um,
The art for that one's adorable, by the way.
it's intentionally adorable, and I found the two great artists who helped me make it seem all the more adorable. And there are only four-sided dice in the whole game, so perfect for little critter paws, because that's all they can pick up. Um, and I've also co-designed Those Who Wander with Amber Litke and VJ Harris, and that was our hack. And I use the term hack not pejoratively, but lovingly, because this is what we had hoped that fifth edition would be one day. and it might not ever be there, but if you're looking for fifth edition style gaming, but are you're kind of done with Wizards of the Coast, Those Who Wander is our sort of love letter to people like that. Um, and yeah, and now playing God, and I my brain is starting to concoct new strange systems already that I don't have time yet to put down on paper, but hopefully one day.
A fun bonus question for you. Have you ever had any ideas you thought were amazing in your head, got them down on paper, shared them with someone, realized they were terrible? Has that happened?
Almost. I didn't get to the point where I shared them with someone. I had a game. I think it was like a third written, and the basic idea was that everything was either a catalyst or a reaction,
Okay.
mostly reactions. So instead of instead of it falling to you, it's your turn. You can go. Now your turn is over because you've taken your action and your bonus action, and now it's another person's turn. It was more like I need to pay attention to what's going on everywhere because if anyone trips and falls, then I can use this reaction. If they cast a spell, then I can use this reaction. So it's just mostly you have this list of reactions to what's going on around you. So it's supposed to be a chain reaction of events,
Mhm.
right? And then when that chain reaction plays out, finally dies down, then someone can start a new catalyst. And it sounded really, really cool. And where it failed was that I couldn't, like, the catalysts didn't work. I invented so many good reactions, but where it failed was starting the chain reaction, um, and that would just go on the back burner. And maybe if I have a good idea somewhere down the line, I will pick it up again. But that's kind of the nature of this hobby and this industry. You might think you have a really good idea until you start to flesh it out, and then it all falls down.
Yeah, some of my video concepts that I've come up with for
Right.
ideas for this channel, I thought, oh, that'll be amazing. And I'll come up with a sentence and think, no, this is terrible. This is actually not, this is not nice. There's not a good fun, because I try and pride myself on being enthusiastic about stuff. I'm like, hang on, this is just negative. I'm like, no, that's not
Mm,
right. So
yeah.
yeah, forcing, not that, trying to very much avoid like toxic positivity and things. I don't want to be just, yay, everything's awesome. But finding an angle, finding a way of, yeah, presenting on a topic, even if it's a great idea, sometimes it doesn't survive, yeah, contact with the real world. So,
Right.
I, mm,
That was a very interesting thing you just said because I think that when you do approach something as a creator, in any, I mean, not just, it could be video creation, it could be rule like game creation, but like I think that most of the time you should start with coming from a place of joy, of like or idealism, like this is how I would like it to be. And I think that will help you a lot. Some people can get away with being fueled by spite, but I
sounds
cannot.
exhausting. No, no, thank you to that.
I don't think it's not sustainable, at least not for me.
Where can people find you on the internet, and what's the best way of supporting your work?
In most places, I am found by just my username is usually Adam Makes TTRPG. I am on YouTube, TikTok. I have my own website, which is adam-hancock.carrd.co, so card.co. And I'm on Blue Sky and Mastodon. I have parted ways with Facebook and Twitter forever, I think. Um, And then yeah, and I'm around. I'm in all the Discord channels I can worm my way into. So
And I'll stick links to all of those in the description. Hopefully, nice and easy to find. But yeah, Adam, thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you all the best with playing God and all the future things. It's been an absolute pleasure.
thank you so much. It's been great to be here.